We have a very special interview today. Carlos Rogers from the Philly Classic Bike Race is here with us. Welcome, Carlos.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks so much for being here, Sam, and taking the time.
Yeah. And I'm going to share with the audience kind of why this is so special. Carlos and I have known each other for less than a year, but it feels like I've known Carlos for longer. We were put in touch by another Philly cycling legend, Joe Wenzel, because Carlos was doing something very special. He's bringing back the Philly bike race that has been dormant for 10 years. And Carlos, can you share everyone the dates when the race is on?
Yeah, for sure. Fast approaching August 30th of this year, tail end of August. And not only do we have the bike race, which is I'm super passionate about, but we're having a 2-day fan fest to kind of bookend the weekend with vendors and expo, people coming in as a adjunct to the race itself. So it'll be a big weekend, August 29th and
Yeah,
30th.
and let's not forget the time trial. So uh, for folks that don't know, this is incredible development because I'm from Philly. That's where I started riding my bike. And you guys are shutting down MLK for a time trial, right? So anyone can sign up and time trial their bike on MLK, West River Drive.
Yep. Yep. So that's a flat out and back, about 8 mile time trial along the banks of the Schuylkill River. And it's promoted by Guys Racing Club, which has been an institution here in Philadelphia, kind of bringing back a time trial that used to be every Saturday morning at the crack of dawn, which was not sanctioned. People just showed up. So we're kind of reincarnating that. You just have to get a 1-day license if you're not already licensed under USA Cycling.
And one reason I bring it up, that's like legit bragging rights. Like if you're winning your group for the West River Drive MLK time trial, like that's the main avenue in town for cyclists. So very exciting to get fans engaged. But Carlos, I wanted to kick this off the way I kick off every interview, which is just to get a little bit more familiar with you and your background. So can you share some context with folks about your day job, as it were?
Sure. I mean, I'll go back to when I was
Great.
after high school. I knew I wanted to be a school teacher. I
Mm.
had some great mentors in high school, and I wanted to kind of carry that mentorship on to students. And ironically, after college, I walked back into my old high school just to say hello to some teachers, and I needed a phys ed teacher, which was my major. So I did that for 3 years, and ironically, that's when I was really getting into cycling full time as more than just a hobby. And after 3 years, I ironically I had met a Danish pro here in Philly for back then it was called the Core States or U.S. Pro Championships. So I thought after 3 years I would go to Denmark and do the romantic American in Europe racing, but quickly found out I didn't have a network or support to do that.
Mm.
Back then there were
That sounds
houses.
sounds pretty good to me. We visited Copenhagen not too long ago. That
Yeah,
that would have
yeah.
been a good path. Yeah.
So I got a few races under my belt, but there was really no support network, and I had no vehicle back then. There were like houses in Belgium where a lot of the Americans would go to, and
Right.
uh,
Crash. Yeah.
yeah, and somebody would kind of look after them. And so I came back with my career in phys ed. I was a personal trainer for 2 years back when people started getting their own personal trainers. I was working at a studio. And then from there, I started working with my brother at the bike shop, Bicycle Therapy.
Hmm.
And I helped him manage the store and learned the industry quite a bit. I knew nothing about the industry from the inside, and made some great friends, great relationships, and ran the team there. That ran its course. And then I went to cosmetology school here in Philadelphia, and I had met my future wife at that point,
Mm.
who had moved to New York to follow her dream of being a hairdresser in New York. So after cosmetology school, I moved to New York and got a job at a salon on 57th Street and lived in the East Village. And I used to ride my bike back and forth. Uh, the 3 miles up to 10 blocks in New York City is 1 mile. So from 2nd Street up to 57th. I got doored twice pretty seriously.
Mm. As one
Um,
does. Yeah.
and I'll never forget those experiences. It was very, very challenging to step on back on the bike after that when someone opens the door right in front of you. And then we moved back to Philadelphia. And in 2008, since then, I opened with my wife, Adrienne Hush Salon Philadelphia in Old City.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been doing hair for about 20 years
Mm,
now. Um,
yeah.
so it's been a journey that you could say would be like the Colorado Rockies, up and down, not
Right.
this straight line. And I'm grateful for all the experiences that I've had. And here we are today. Tomorrow I'll go into work cutting hair, and in between I'll be answering calls and emails and working on the Philadelphia Cycling Classic. That's how it's been for the
Incredible.
past 4 years.
Right. Right. Okay. So let's dive into it. I was really excited just to hear from you some of the context and history for the race. Can you talk a little bit about the sort of race, the golden era run it had, and how that motivated you to try to revitalize it?
Sure. Yeah, I missed the first year or two, I think. And back then, I would say the bike race was a novelty here. It was 85. Eric Heiden won the first race. For your viewers, if they don't know, he was a five-time gold medal Olympian speed skater. Went on to
Mm.
become a professional cycling team and helped really start the team with 7-Eleven. And then went on to
And I'm
become
sorry, an American or
Eric Hodden, yep, and now
okay,
he's,
all right, great.
yep, living in, I think he has, 2, orthopedic offices, I believe, in, Utah, and, so he was part and parcel to the development of professional cycling here, and, had the good looks to go with it and won the first race here in 1985. And then it started to build on itself. Fans came out, and it was an opportunity to be, you know, up close to this kind of sport that people really didn't understand as much, but they knew that these athletes were incredible. And back then, for the first, 10 years as it grew, it was just a men's race. It was 156 miles, 10 loops of the course with 3 finishing circuits from Logan Circle on the Parkway to Lemon Hill. The caravans, the athletes coming from overseas. Back in its heyday, like you said, there were 2 lead up races prior to the US Pro Championships, and there was a race in Lancaster, a 90-mile race on Tuesday, and then another 90-mile race on Thursday in Trenton. And so those
And I
races.
guess, and Carl, sorry, just to kind of paint the picture with that growth and development of the race, what was cycling like as an American sport that an everyday professional would pick up? Was it still super niche? Was it a little bit more popular than it is now? Can you draw that comparison?
Yeah, I mean, back then, for myself, I could race Saturday and Sunday from, April to September. I mean, there were races,
Hmm.
not only criteriums, road races, stage races, and primarily our team raced up and down the East Coast. As I moved up the ranks from when I first started, they brought in the category 5, so I had to go one category up to a 4 and then 3, and finally got to be a 1. And there were a lot of pro am races where we would race with teams like Mercury, Saturn, 7 Up, and so
So,
there were tons of races.
basically, you're saying that, yeah, just more races and more places. You could pick a destination for
Yep,
any weekend in the spring and summer and do
definitely.
it. Yeah,
Yeah, it was
sounds like
awesome.
maybe you could do every few weeks, like in 2026, right? You can pick a
Yeah, I
race and
mean,
show up
there's been
every
a lot of
2 or 3
changes
weeks.
with cycling. It's gotten a broader in its expansion of how people participate. Obviously, gravel racing has gotten very big. Radenoring, where people are riding, 100 and 200 miles and then camping, fondos and gravel rides, fundraisers, and things like that. And just people, I think, being more choosy about deciding to race this weekend, or you know what, I'm just going to go for a
Right,
ride. And
right.
back when I was racing, there was no option. We're doing this race next week. We're doing that race, and so I think now the sport's gotten, which is great, more diversified, but it's also kind of left a little bit of a hole in road racing.
Or yeah, road racing has been, for lack of like diluted or watered down a little bit, which and we can talk more about kind of the challenges of race promotion. But yeah, back to the context of kind of
Yeah,
the heyday.
yeah, and what a thrill it was to see, the top riders, race, on the streets of your hometown, and I get goosebumps every time I talk about it. Just now, waiting for the police motorcade to come around. Here in Philly, the cops on the big Harleys would be, the rumble, you'd hear them, then the helicopter over top, and you'd get ready to watch the riders come by. And it was just a happening and exciting
Right.
and a thrill to be out there. In fact, in 1994, I had the opportunity to do the race. Was able to do Trenton. Unfortunately, I flatted with a lap to go, right behind Sean Yates back then, and I didn't have the support that he did, and he was able to get right back in. And I got too far behind, so I had to drop out. But that was a rush. Coors Light was back then, and also racing and Motorola, and then I was able to race on that Sunday in 1994 with my neighbors, writing my name on the wall and having signs for me. And I just drove down 10 minutes to Pennsylvania Avenue to park my car, and there I was at the start. And so it was just a highlight for so many Philadelphians and so many American racers. Um, for a number of years, it was the U.S. Pro Championships. We didn't have enough Americans to participate, so we brought the overseas riders here, and the first American over the line was crowned the U.S. Pro Champion until, I believe, in the early 2010s, the race was moved, I think, to Tennessee for the actual American Road Race Championships.
Yeah, which is crazy because it's not that long ago that it was so prominent in U.S. racing, and I think we really need to emphasize that point, how big of a deal the race was for that long, in our sport, which is kind of, I always say, an underdog sport. Philly was the most important race in the country, right? Is that safe to say?
It was
Or
the U.S. Pro
yeah,
Championships. It was the Stars and Stripes, to wear for a year.
right.
So, I think that while some tactics may have come into play here and there, if riders were up the road and there were two Americans following, they were going to duke it out for the Stars and
Right.
Stripes. So it was certainly an honor. And it was the most prestigious race, one day race here in America to win.
So I'm glad we emphasized that. The other part of the emphasis I want to make is on the spectator fan side, right? So one, I hadn't thought about the race format, which it was 10 loops, and we can talk about that moving forward. But basically, it was a massive party, right? So Manayunk is home to a lot of college age kids. Lemon Hill is this kind of beautiful, it's a park, very central to Philadelphia, so people would show up and picnic and barbecue and party. But the race format is relevant because the race would come by 10 times, right? So you don't go out and it's oh, they passed and that's it. You could see a decent amount of action. So can you speak a little bit more to kind of the race
Uh,
atmosphere, because I think that's a big part of the draw for
sure,
people that, most of
sure.
us aren't
Yeah.
race
And I can
enthusiasts,
feel my
not
hair
cyclists.
kind of getting up
Right.
on this. I mean, just, 100,000 fans. Philly loves a party.
100,000. Yeah.
Oh, just, the wall would be, triple, quadruple deep,
And
deafening.
also, can you share about the wall too, please,
Sure.
please,
So
for
the
those
course is a bit of
uninitiated?
a yep. Sorry to interrupt. The course is, I guess you could say, a bit like a dog bone, where the start finish historically was on the Ben Franklin Parkway, right in front of the Art Museum, and modeling after the Champs Elysees. So there's a long parkway. After the start, it went out along the Schuylkill Flat. It's called Kelly Drive into Manayunk, and the race really helped to build Manayunk economically and residentially,
Mm,
because prior to that, it was more or less just more of an industrial community, and not as known for much. But the bike race brought visibility to that community, and ancillary also Roxborough and East Falls, two other communities that the race goes through. But at the end of that course, at the end of the dog bone, you make a right hand turn, as everybody knows, and that goes up the Manayunk Wall, which is kind of a peaks at 17% at the steepest part. And an ode to, I think, European races, the only cobblestone section. After you start the turn up Levering and you make a right, turns into Lyceum, you go over just a stretch of cobblestones before you start the climb. So it's a nice little touch there to the
and they're
European.
they're like legit cobblestones. I mean,
Yeah,
they're
it's just
they're
a few seconds.
chunky
Yep.
and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yep. Not rivaling Paris-Roubaix for those fans, but you do
Good
get a
enough.
taste
Good
of
enough
Europe.
for Philly, right?
Sure,
Yeah,
exactly. And so
yeah.
you start the climb, and it pitches up, and then it kind of makes a left, a bends to the left, and that's where the pitch gets very, very steep. The challenge after that is that it's a false flat after you climb that
Mm.
17% for another block and a half or so before you make a right turn. So it really does not end at the 17% grade. It keeps going. And, it's known around the world as the wall.
Right. And
And
that's where the party's at, right?
exactly. And when the originators of the race back in 1985 started the race, they wanted an iconic part to resemble something similar to Europe, like Flesh Wallone, for example. So we have this hill, and everybody knows the hill. Then there's the fall from the wall in Manayunk, and it's all residential. And people just come out and see this whole procession of, you know, lead vehicles, helicopters, motorcycles, cars, the whoosh of the riders, the cars following behind, maybe some riders in between with mechanicals, holding on to cars and, getting something fixed. Comes back down onto Kelly Drive through Midvale Avenue, right in East Falls, and then essentially makes another turn up Strawberry Hill, which is part of Fairmount Park, and Fairmount Park is the largest urban park in the country, and so there's in Philadelphia, it's not just one area; it's kind of spread out in different regions. But it goes up through Strawberry
And
Hill.
for folks thinking about visiting Philly, Wissahickon Trail is part of Fairmount Park. Fantastic 10-ish mile mountain biking
Yeah,
trails,
super
right
technical.
outside the
Yeah, a
city.
mecca
Yeah,
for mountain biking.
super technical, by the
Yeah,
way. Don't fool yourself.
yeah,
Be,
but we're
be
very
right. Yeah.
fortunate to have Wissahickon trails as part of Fairmount Park. And then it comes back down onto Kelly Drive, and then the famous Lemon Hill, like you said, is where people just barbecue, hang out. It's a short little punchy climb, but it's a place where people come together because there's a large lawn where people hang out and commiserate. And the great thing is, and then comes back down onto Kelly Drive and basically around Eakins Oval, and that's the loop back out the Parkway. The great thing about bike racing, especially with a circuit like this, is that you can view multiple areas of the course and
Right.
see the riders come around, and it's just uh, always been a place to come and I basically say it's kind of like, Sam, hey, I'll see you next year on Lemon Hill. I might not
Right.
see you during the year, but you get a chance to connect with your friends, family, people in the cycling community while the race is going on. It takes about 25 minutes or so for each lap.
Well, thanks for the outline. And yeah, I mean, so there are a couple of points of emphasis I want to make in this interview. We've talked a little bit about the state of specifically road racing in the U.S. right now, and back in the, I guess, 90s, maybe late 80s, you could pick a town, there's going to be a race there and fill your schedule. There's a big sort of headline about how road racing has been flagging now for years and years and years. So I think this puts into focus how large of a challenge and undertaking you have started bringing the race back, and from every different aspect. I mean, obviously sponsorship is important, but as we move on from the 80s, 90s, aughts, teens, like, municipalities are just getting more litigious, they're not getting less, right? And insurance is getting more expensive. That's been another one of the massive headlines. And so when you have a start from scratch, all of these things have compounded to create a really large hurdle to start this thing. So starting from the very beginning, can you share with folks what was the inspiration, what was the motivation to mount this Herculean effort to get this thing going again? And I can't underemphasize it, because you, Carlos, and your team, who we'll learn more about, are doing the work that we need to do to bring road racing back. So this is a huge story. So thank you for doing this, and please tell
Yeah.
us how you do it. Yeah.
Oh man, I wish I sometimes picture myself in front of a business audience or a college class and talk about how to make this happen. And
Right.
I couldn't give anybody a straight answer. But first of all, this is this is not my idea. This race, what was here, it has a history, it has a backbone, and so it has leverage. And I pay
Right.
homage to the previous promoters who originated and brought this spectacular event to America and helped to put professional bike racing here.
And are there a couple folks you want to shout out, or
I mean, for those that don't know, it was, it started with Jerry Casale uh, and uh,
was Dave Chauner
Dave
another one
Chauner. Sorry,
in the mix?
just
Yeah.
didn't say Dave
So
Chauner.
Dave Chauner he was someone I chatted with years ago who was so supportive of hill climbers and what I talked about, just building sort of a community around a business community specifically around the sport.
Yeah.
Because I think he knew that it could make waves, and you and I would be talking one day,
And here we are.
I would be supporting you as much as I could, and
Yeah.
so shout out Dave Chauner.
Yeah. And,
thanks for all of his support.
Yep, there was another one of my mentors, Jack Toland, who was from Philadelphia, who helped to design the course. So I didn't wake up with this idea to have a bike race in Philadelphia. The concept was already proven for multiple years. It just so happened that in 2016, the race ended. And the elephant in the room, as most cyclists will know, and for sure team owners and event owners, is that the cycling model is very challenging to sustain. And we can make that for another podcast about the economics of it.
Yeah, that'll be your course for the students that you mentioned. Right?
There you go. Have to go back to school. And so, it's been a 10-year hiatus. I never in a million years thought that I would be here talking to you about the Philadelphia Cycling Classic on August 30th, presented by Amerigas. Not in a million years. But the spark happened in 2022, the night of, after watching the Maryland Cycling Classic, which was the first UCI race we had here post-COVID, and really since 2019, after we lost the Tour of California. The first UCI race at an international level. And that night, I emailed the director, and I said, great job. I'm a small promoter here in Philadelphia, and because I do my own criterium every year in Riverton, New Jersey, called the Historic Riverton.
Which was 2 weeks ago, so
right.
You don't have enough on your plate, Carlos.
That's right.
You did a successful crit a couple weeks ago.
So that's 15 years that I
wow.
been doing that. And there were times over the past 10 years where you would see on Facebook memories or people talking about the state of the cycling in America and just really down about it. And so that night, after watching the Maryland Cycling Classic, I got a little FOMO and I got a little jealous. And I said to myself, I'm tired of hearing the negative, commentary. There's no they out there that should be doing it, because who is they? They is you or me or someone to take up the charge.
They're not doing it. Yeah,
they're not doing it. And so it was literally that week of the Maryland Cycling Classic in 2022 that piqued my interest and my excitement at the possibility of trying to do this. And, not really knowing all of the aspects and logistics that it would take to bring the race to the streets. I just wanted the bike race back, really, like most people. There's a lot more to it than just having a bike race. And later that week, I reached out to, an iconic woman in the sport, Robin Morton, who's been involved in one way or another in cycling for over 35 years as a team owner, team director, event manager. She was involved in one way or another with the Philadelphia Cycling Classic since its inception. And in 2013, went on to direct the race outright for her own company, G4 Events, and running it through the city. So we had
by the way, we also have to highlight that like you said, women's races were introduced at some point, and Kate Verno, who was on the show recently, I think it was 2 episodes ago, cites the Philly Classic as her aha moment for getting on a bike and racing a bike, because she literally did not know that women were racing bikes on that level. So
so for a number of years,
women were involved from a very early stage in this race.
I can't recall. It might have been in the early 2000s, the Liberty Classic, and that race was run concurrently while the men's were racing. So the men started first, and then women would start about 15 minutes later.
But there
And
was a woman at the helm, or organizing everything from early days, right?
yeah, so, I had never met Robin, and as she's on the other side at a much higher level than I would have been as an amateur pro-am cyclist, but I had heard about her. And I reached out to her. I said, "You have a minute to chat?" And she said, "Sure." And she knew who I was, which was surprising, that I had done Riverton for a number of
Hmm.
years. And I got her on the phone that week, and I said, "What do you think about bringing Philly back?" And she was like, "Great race. Would love to, however I can help." And I said, "Well, if I get the money, then I'm going to hire you." And that was the genesis of starting the process independently to undertake what is a massive effort. And from there,
And I think that's a good thing to call out. Like, you understood it was a massive effort. You knew that you need a team and need support, and it wasn't the Carlos show. You knew
yeah,
from jump that it was way bigger than that. So
yeah,
that's
and I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing it because I love the sport. And Robin has copious notes from all the previous events. She is an encyclopedia of information. And going back to my day job, I started with people in my chair, just doing 6 degrees of separation. Hey, I'm trying to bring Philly back. And my client said,
it's
"Well,
the
you need a
ultimate
deck."
networking, the
Yeah,
barbershop
there
networking,
you go.
right?
My client was, "Well, you need a deck. You need, I have to give something to somebody to." So
What's a deck? Yeah.
exactly. What's a deck?
Yeah.
I didn't even know what a deck was. I mean, I guess, it's a sponsorship proposal for those that don't know, but it's
Yeah.
more in depth. And so I worked with a graphic designer down the street, and I found copy online and started piecemealing together what it would look like. And
It's the
Robin
village,
gave me,
right?
a rough estimate of a budget. And, it really started at the salon. And a lot of my clients knew the race. And when I asked them about supporting it in one way or another, they would light up. First, they didn't realize it wasn't here anymore. And then they would go back to, "Oh, I remember watching a Lemon Hill, or I used to ride my bike to Manayunk, or, we used to have a barbecue." And so people would get excited at this effort that I was undertaking.
I think just to get a little bit, um what's the word I'm for looking for, just to reminisce, like, it does harken back to simpler times, right? Before the media landscape, with digital media landscape, was as crazy, before all of this crazy digital connectivity. Like, um it was a bit of a feels like a bit of a simpler time.
Totally.
So I can
Yeah,
see nostalgia being a huge pull for people, and maybe some of the connective tissue that we've been talking about, just
definitely.
to motivate everyone to get off their
Y-
ass and
Yeah.
and help out, right?
I got on LinkedIn. I started making connections there, and I would send cold emails to every company that I could find here in the city. I would send emails to industry folks. I would just try and use the tentacles that my brother might have had, and it's almost like in Roman times or medieval times. You're looking at this rock, and how are you going to move it uphill?
Yeah.
Um, I didn't even have the tools. I didn't know if it was going to be a wedge or pushing or a rope and pull it. So going back, to the origination of this, it was just the passion and the persistence and the perseverance of giving it 100%. And those are my three
Right.
P's. And my wife well knows this, that, and other people too, that when I get a passion for something, it's a calling. And I don't care if it's a passion for sweeping the floor and getting all the nooks and crannies under the chair in the corner, or doing a haircut, or being someone in business and making sure that the email that you're sending doesn't have typos. It's just doing a good job. And
Yeah.
and that comes with passion. That's an internal drive. And I worked my butt off, making all these connections. And there were a period of time where I was able to get some, great meetings. One scheduler sent me out a Teams invite. I didn't know what a Teams invite was, and I said, "Okay, Teams," and I kept going back and forth. And I'm dealing with a senior executive here, so there was a steep learning curve into the executive
Yeah.
C-suite level of how to handle that. Um, and it was definitely an up and down ride. And there were times where I had a couple of, high-end meetings, and I thought, "They're gonna give me $1,000,000." Um, and then it went nowhere. And I realized that I had no, CV behind me of proof that I could do this. And so definitely a risk. But at the time, it was me and Robin. Had no TV, had no sponsor, had
Hmm.
no, had nothing. Um, and so when you see that door in front of you, it's easy to just leave it closed and say, you know what, I did my best. And
Right.
then I couldn't let it go. Um, I just I would give it a rest for a month or two, and then say, you know what, let's give it another go and try again.
So, yeah, I think taking a bit of a zoom out, what, with your experience so far, what do you think the main challenges for race directors, race promoters are these days in this undertaking?
For sure, it's community, part and parcel. You have to have the community behind you. Again, going back to the roots of the race, it already existed. There are a lot of partners we have in the city that were working for the city back when the race was live on the
Hmm.
streets. They knew the
Right.
history and they knew the
Right.
success, so they knew it was a great event.
Honestly, Carlos, I did not anticipate that you were going to share that answer. Community. We talk about that as kind of the major theme of this show, and that makes so much sense. I mean, it's not something you can just purely muscle through on
No.
your own with one
Yeah.
other partner.
Yeah.
Like and what you all have done is, you keep mentioning that it's a legacy race. You've sort of stood on the shoulders of what, Dave and the other promoters did in the past to get people back on board. So you've kind of sped up the process that would take years to build a community to
Sure.
start a race like this from
Right.
scratch, and
Right.
and you've jump started it. So
Right.
I think that's very interesting answer. Thank you.
And to that point, one of my first calls was, it was in the fall of 2022. Robin had said, if you don't get Manayunk on board, you're not going to have the race,
Mm, mm.
because there were points when too much of a good thing led to some bad things happening. Uh,
We're talking about partying
and
right
we're
here.
talking about Philly.
Philly's got
Yeah,
a
right.
reputation that
Exactly.
precedes it
And
in
so
the
you can
partying department.
imagine, spectators, fun, alcohol, and having to move your
Things can get
car.
out of hand. Yeah,
Right. And
yeah,
so the residents, rightfully so, and I can empathize, got upset with having such a large scale event with people who didn't, live in your community, show up for a day and, kind of,
right.
end up kind of going crazy. And so one of my first calls was to the Manayunk Neighbors Council, and I reached out to the president there, and I said, I'm trying to bring the race back, and I'd love to have a letter of support, a document, so that I can start step by step building the blocks and showing people that I have support. And he was like, "Well, can I announce that the race is coming back?" And I was like, "No, you're my first call. Don't say anything. I don't even know if the race is coming back. I'm trying to build a critical mass here." And ironically,
I think that says a lot about how you handle your business, because I think a different race promoter would say absolutely let them
yeah,
know.
no,
Yeah,
I was very tight-lipped about my effort via the
right,
press. I didn't want to be that guy or that woman
right,
saying I'm going to bring something back, get some big press release out, and then fall flat.
right.
So for almost 2 years, I kept it very, very low. And then when I rebounded again to give it a shot, I reached out to the Philadelphia Business Journal and the Philadelphia Inquirer to try and get a story in the hopes that my effort would reach the tables, the desks of executives in the area. And I was able to get some articles there and some movement. People heard about me, but that fell flat. And that's when I was really on my last legs. And I don't know if now's the time to introduce my partners, but that's when I
Oh, hit us
yeah.
with it. Yep.
So after kind of a rocky road by myself trying to do this, and just like this isn't going to work. One of my coworkers suggested that I reach out to a mutual client of our salon, Eric Robbins, who I knew casually just from coming into the salon, but he was not my client. And so why don't you call Eric? He's Philadelphia kind of entrepreneur, socialite, knows a lot of people, invested in the city. So I called Eric and I said, "Hey, I'm working on trying to bring this race back." And he's like, "Well, send me your stuff. What do you got?" And by then I had developed the deck even more. And he got back to me and he's like, "Dude, this is amazing. We got to do this." And I'm like, "Okay."
Not a cyclist, by the way.
Not a cyclist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been trying to do this for 2 years, Eric. How are we gonna
Right.
do this?" He's like, "Well, how much do you need?" And he's like, "Yeah, we should be able to do that." And I told him about working with Robin and all the outreach that I had made, not only to community members, but, civic leaders. And, ironically, he said, "Well, I happen to be very good friends with former Mayor Michael Nutter, who is a beloved mayor here, two-term mayor here in Philadelphia, part and parcel to the race for 8 years, helped to get the women's race to world tour level, uh, towards the tail end, whose wife is a track cyclist and medalist on
And
the track."
she's like a masters world champion or
That's right.
something,
I'm
or
not sure world
yeah.
champion, but she may have medaled, Lisa Nutter. And he said, "Well, let's get a meeting with Michael." Ironically, I had reached out to, and everybody knows my story is that I have a pot on boil all the time, and I keep putting spaghetti in even today. And when it's just about right, I throw it against the wall to see what sticks. And I
Hmm.
had reached out to Michael 2 years prior, and he got back to me, because I was just trying to get anyone to help. But he wasn't the mayor at the time, and he didn't want to overlap any um, of anybody's other position in the city. So he never really got back to me. And so we met for a brief meeting, and it takes 10 seconds to make a good first impression. I'm not starstruck, but I knew that he had the ability and the wherewithal and the network, if he was supportive of it, to help expand our outreach in sponsorship. And so we met briefly, and he eyed me up, and I told him the work that we had been doing. And it was a brief meeting. Afterwards, I asked Eric, what he thought. He said, "Yeah, I think he's into it." And then we had another meeting about a month later, where again I had just been, clawing to try and do something to get this race back. And that was a signature moment for me because here I
Hmm.
am sitting with the former mayor, with Eric.
And
Yeah,
this isn't just any mayor, but another point I want to reemphasize. I mean, Michael Nutter was a really a massive force in making Philadelphia, I think, what it
absolutely,
is today. Really putting it on the map, and I think, like you said, a beloved mayor. So
absolutely.
to get someone of his stature on board is a big deal.
And so yeah, exactly. And so we had the second meeting, and I expressed again the work that I had been doing, and Eric was very supportive. Ultimately, during that meeting, he said, "I love this city, I love this race, and I believe in you." And that
I'm
that
getting
was a
chills
signature.
now.
Yeah, I mean, it brought me to tears. I sometimes get emotional now because, when you work so hard for something, um,
Hmm.
it's a very lonely road. And I had spoke to another entrepreneur here, in the city, and asked for his support, and he said, "I wish I could help you. You're doing a great thing, but it's a lonely road." And it is a lonely road because you only have yourself to look at the mirror, maybe a few people saying, "Good job, go get him, Tiger." But if I quit, the race quits. It was purely just the will to keep going to bring this race back for the greater good. I had this calling, and so then I thought, okay, now we're in it. And between Mayor Nutter and Eric, I kind of let them take it from there to try and squeeze out more at the higher level with executives.
Hmm.
And we worked for another year to try and get meetings. He got up to speed with Robin's work. He got up to speed with the work that I've been doing. We had met with a few people in the city to pitch it, to get the date on the
And
calendar.
you started this in earnest after the Baltimore Classic in 2022, right?
Right.
So
So now this
this
is
is we're getting
2024.
to a 4-year undertaking.
Yep.
Yep, yep,
Yep.
yep.
So this was the summer of 2024. And originally I had thought when I started, I'll try to get the race in 24 with Robin. She said, "Oh, maybe 2 years." And then I thought, well,
Twice as long. Yeah.
right. Let's try and get it in
Right,
2025 as a build up to what's happening now, which is a semi-quincentennial, the celebration of the 250th
right.
anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. We have so many events going on, and the goal was to get it uplifted into 2026. So we didn't have a dry run in 2025. It's happening in 2026.
Well, let's talk about why it's happening in 2026. And you mentioned bringing kind of filling out an executive team and owners. I think you all are co-owners
Yep.
of this race,
Yep.
right?
Race Street Partners.
So
Yep.
yeah, one of my questions to you, which you answered so well, is what was kind of the tipping point that got you to where you are right now on about to launch this race for the first time in 10 years, and the answer was community and your business partners.
Yeah.
But how'd you land the sponsor,
Yeah.
which is really I think the keystone, right?
Yeah.
Pun intended, of this whole thing.
Totally. Totally. I mean, and going back to the model of cycling, if you don't have invested partners who understand the sport and see how it can impact the community and bring a return to their own brand, you're going to go nowhere. And it was another 6 degrees of separation that we made the connection to AmeriGas. We had Eric and Michael had met with a local bank executive here, who they were not able to do the heavy lift as a high end financial sponsor. But a few weeks later, this executive sent an email to Michael saying, "Michael, meet Bob. Bob's a new CEO of AmeriGas under the UGI Corporation, and an avid cyclist. Bob,
Mm.
Michael is the former mayor of Philadelphia and working to bring back the Philadelphia Cycling Classic." So there's the in, right? Someone who's passionate about the sport, understands cycling, understands the uniqueness of it, and how it could relate to their own brand. And so I wasn't able to meet the first meeting with Bob Flexon, but Michael and Eric pitched the event to him, and it was about a month later or so they had another meeting, and it seemed to be going in the right direction. And then we had another meeting at their headquarters in King of Prussia. AmeriGas, for those that don't know, is a propane distributor, the largest distributor in all 50 states of the U.S. And again, a subsidiary of UGI, which is an international energy company running in multiple countries in Europe. And so we sat down with myself, Eric, Bob, Robin, and a few other executives from his leadership team. And basically, at the end of that meeting, I think it was another few days, and Eric called me and said, "They're in." Man, I don't even know how I felt then. It was just, wow, we have a title sponsor. I thought I was done. I thought, that's it. I can take a break
And
now.
just to drill down a little bit, the title sponsor, and I'm sort of putting words in your mouth, but that was what you needed to actually hit the go button,
Yeah,
right? So
we
can you elaborate a little bit
sure.
more on what was riding on that meeting?
Yeah, I mean, it's a significant financial investment, as you can imagine. And I think going back to this country compared to Europe, where races go, uh, you know, annually for 100 years, and people are used to it, here it's not the same way. So it's hard to get that buy-in to understand the greater good. What is it good for us as a business, and what's good for the race, and what's good for the community. And we have been blessed with. I'm not religious, but we've been blessed with with their support. And so to have a national company with a great
Right.
pedigree, with executives, not only Bob Flexon but Mike Sharp, who actually is uh, running day to day AmeriGas, believe in the sport, believe in what it is for the community. I mean, that's the hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
If you can get a business that is invested, passionate, and supportive, that's what relationships are about.
Right.
And
And
from the
I
beginning,
do want to make one observation, which is it took a cyclist as one of the chief executive, or one of the C suites, right, to say, I understand what the value is of what you're providing, and yes, I will sign the check, right?
right,
And I'm calling that out because we started the conversation talking about supporting cycling in the U.S., and the more of these dots that we could connect with people, that know what it means, which is a minority, right? It's a minority. The more we can get together and do crazy things, like
yeah,
relaunch the race, right?
yeah,
So
it goes back.
great story.
Yeah, back to what I said, that we're all in it for the same reasons. We all
Yeah.
share the same passion. We love cycling. We love bike racing, and they they have been super supportive. A great team to work with. I didn't know till a few months after that UGI, and there's so many layers to this. UGI started here in Center City, Philadelphia, in the late
Hmm.
1800s. So it just, it went, like you said, connecting the dots. it
Right.
just keeps getting more and
Incredible.
more. And if you look at that map, it becomes a, kind of a spider web, almost an art piece of interconnectivity.
Right.
So many people are just a step away from having some
It's a
relationship
beautiful thing.
to the
Yeah.
race. And so,
Well,
and so we
sorry,
so
sorry.
we got that relationship with AmeriGas. And then I think for a brief time, the three of us, Michael, Eric, and myself, were a little bit of deer in headlights. We weren't sure. Okay, we have an investor. Now what? How do we make this? What do we do now? And that's where we expanded the team through connections. And
Mhm.
Michael, through his relationship, very friendly with a woman named Mary Stengel Austin, who previously had a large PR firm, a very good networker, knows a lot of people, super humble. We had a meeting with her shortly after in the summer of 24, and she sat down with us. And okay, well, who do you know? Did you talk to this person? What about this? And she started taking all these notes. And I was just so impressed and had a certain level of comfort that she would be able
Mm.
to, with Michael and myself and Eric, expand our outreach. At the same time, Robin would be feeding us notes from the director's point of view and race logistics on her end. Now, if you go back to bike racing, she's in the breakaway. I mean, she's up the road riding solo because
Mhm.
she's done it multiple years. I've done my criterium for many years, but this is a different breed
Right.
altogether. So
Another level.
we have been for the past year and a half playing catch up to the speed that she runs at because she's used to doing things a certain way. And so, look, every road has its lumps, and we've been learning as we go. Decisions every day, a decision now on what I say and how I say it. I have to realize
Yeah.
that I'm a public persona now, but I'm just a normal guy. And if I could get that across to everybody, it can be any normal person, male or female, that has a calling, whether or not it's to put on a professional bike race at this level, or put on a criterium in your backyard, or to start a gravel
Or
race,
do a podcast,
or do
right?
a podcast.
Yeah.
They is us. It's you and me doing things. And so I just want people to know that, I've always said, I don't care who hands the flowers out on race day to the winners.
Right.
I just want the flowers to be handed out. And for me, my finish line is the start line of August 30th, or that
Right.
weekend. So it's been a yeoman's effort. And so with Mary, she, Eric and I were just kind of like, oh, we need a PR company, or we need a social media person, or we need a marketing person. And, we just started talking about that a little bit. And that's when Mary introduced us to Maggie Wilkinson and her amazing team at Athena Global Advisors. I had no idea what an agency was or how they
Right.
operated. And, I mean, I'm sitting here in this room with, five people watching me
It
with their
looks pro,
cameras,
man.
social
Yeah, you got a
media,
whole team back there,
taking
right?
notes. And, this is not a place where I ever thought I would be. I just
Yeah.
thought I would be on the parkway, watching a bike race, but there's a lot that goes into it. And so with Athena, they've helped with branding, social media, sponsorship outreach and negotiations, contract negotiations, community outreach, video production. And if you're going to
That's a
bring this
lot.
race
Yeah.
back, you have one opportunity. Not only is it 2026 and it's coming back with a bang, but to bring this race back, you can't do it under the cover of darkness. You can't just say, hey, we're bringing a bike race back. You have to go back to the community. You have to go back to your civic leaders. You have to get your,
Come correct. Yeah.
yeah, all of your sponsors on the same page. And from day one, we've all been about transparency and relationships. This is not a transactional one-off where give me your money so I can put a bike race on and see you later. I've ridden with Bob and his son and his partner Katrina. Um, Here, we did a ride called the Monkey Knife Fight for anybody that wants a very challenging ride here in the outskirts of Philadelphia. I've ridden with them. We've commiserated at various meetings. All the people here at Athena, I'm on a first name basis with. And then from there, we brought in Divine and Partners, our PR firm. We need people that can help us, get to the start line. And
Right.
they have the utmost experience, Athena and Divine and Mary and everybody that's helping us out. They're invested. And one thing that we've made clear to all of them is that this isn't normal for you. We are not some promotion group coming out of Austin or coming out of Oklahoma
Right.
to put on this race. We are Philadelphians, and this race is by Philadelphians for Philadelphians. So don't treat us like a pharmaceutical company where you're just creating some ad
Right.
that no one's invested in. I know from my dealings with everybody on our team that they're excited and they're invested, and they all play a part in getting to the start line.
I think this is a good transition for one of the questions I was really most excited to ask. Like you talk, you and I have talked a lot about this not being a one-off. You have these partners that are not in it for the short term; they're in it for next year, the year after. How, from a business perspective, how are you establishing that longevity? How do you not do what every other great American race does, and sort of come up short when you're looking? And granted, I know we haven't gotten to the finish line of the first one yet, but how are you setting yourself up for success to come back next year and the year after?
Yeah, I mean, we already have the date on the calendar for next year. We've already spoken to AmeriGas about continuing on their relationship and our other partners. But we have to prove, that we can do this in the first year.
Right.
And again, going back to the model, the business model of cycling is that we could have a contract with AmeriGas for 5 years and they're going to give us X amount. But the bottom line is that next year their numbers could be down and they could say, you know what, we can't support the race. And we have no leverage with that. That's just how things are.
Hmm.
Happens all the time. And so the goal is through our own personalities, our own passion for our relationships, for this race, for the community, that it's becomes not just something to be a part of, but to be involved in and
Right.
to continue that relationship because they see the value. And Eric came up with a great term. I mean, this is the people's race. There's an
Right.
ownership here in
Right.
Philadelphia. People take ownership of their sports, as you know, whether or not it's going down Broad Street for the Super Bowl or being out there for the Philadelphia Cycling Classic. This is their race for the people, and I think that has a unique perception for our sponsors that it's right in their own backyard.
And I think a little bit just thinking through this kind of repeatability challenge. The more seeds you plant, the more relationship. Okay, maybe you didn't get the sponsor to sign on for this year, but you guys make it a hit this year, and you've got the relationship for next year.
Yeah, I mean,
That in itself, right, will help de-risk some of it. You're building the Rolodex. You know who the players
sure.
are.
Yeah, I mean, we've got some other great partners. Penn Medicine, the behemoth here in the city. I mean, the world renowned medical group has come on as a premier
Right.
sponsor, and we have
Biggest
some small.
employer in the state,
Yeah,
probably, right?
could be. And we have some smaller sponsors, financial sponsors that we're offering hospitality packages to kind of get their toes wet in their hands on the
Right.
bag on the barricades,
Right.
see who's coming down the start finish, and that's what we have to do. We have to build it.
I did want to shout out Carolyn Braff at Gatorade, and Chris Tolley, a local race director here, who's got quite a online following. I think he put you guys in touch with Red Bull.
That's right.
So that was a good example of some of the networking that
Yep.
myself and the Hill Climbers community did
Yep.
to support you guys. So
Yeah, and it's
team
again
effort. Yeah.
6 degrees of separation. Gatorade has come in with hydration support. It's a relatively small step to get involved, but hopefully we show
Yeah.
them the value, right? And then next year, Gatorade comes in and has a whole expo with a hydration tent and supporting the athletes. Red Bull again are coming in with their marketeers and another step for them. Chris Tolley won the Red Bull Hill climb in San Francisco when Red Bull sponsored that, and I would
Right.
love to bring that back the day before in Manayunk with Red Bull taking ownership of that, and to get these national and international brands that are widely recognized and respected to be a part of this. Just like you spoke with Kate Verno and Zwift taking over
Yeah.
Tour de France Femme, they're in it for the long haul, and I'm in it for the long haul, for better or for worse, on my mental state. But it has been an amazing journey, and we just keep going
Yeah.
on
I
every day.
I I do want to be mindful of your time. There's one more key question I was personally really excited to ask. So we've talked about these business hurdles and getting the community involved, and you know that side of this equation. How do you get how do you get world tour teams to come back to Philly to race with you guys. You guys did that press release a month or two ago,
Yeah.
and I mean, I was so excited and so proud that you've done this. I mean, I can't. That is a huge accomplishment. So, chapeau, and I would love some insight into what the mechanism was to get those teams participating and back on board.
Yeah, I think it's kind of multi-layered. The first is that Robin, has everybody on speed dial around the world and has tentacles out there. And, she is so well revered that, if she calls, you pick up the phone. And so she
Mhm.
put the tentacles out there to teams all over the world. So, there's that direct relationship to team directors and managers. The other layer is that a lot of these directors and managers previously were professional racers and raced here in Philadelphia, and so they have that hands-on experience of what it was like to race here in Philadelphia. One of our ambassadors is Fred Rodriguez, who won here, 3 times and a 4-time U.S. Pro Champion. He said, coming down the Ben Franklin Parkway is like the biggest outdoor stadium that he ever raced in, and
Right.
so there's that relationship to previous riders who can share that with the younger generation, particularly the Europeans who've never raced at this level in America. Back then, when the race first started, it was kind of off the radar for Europe, and it was just this
Right.
race that was happening in America, and the riders could take a week off and kind of have a bit of a vacation if they won the race. It wasn't a huge deal on their palmares compared to European races, but the race grew in stature. And now, because there's no American racing, to have the younger generation raced on American soils, the roads are different, the trees are different,
Yeah.
the houses are different. It creates a uniqueness to it.
I, Another great answer, Carlos, because like you don't think necessarily that some of your leverage in getting these teams back on board is the network, the OGs, right? That are now at the top running things. I mean,
Right.
that makes perfect sense. And I think another thing I wanted to call out, I was talking to Chris Tolley about this, and he's like, I want to help because I want to race that thing. So the course itself is a rad, like, badass course and especially for those punchers that aren't necessarily climbers. Like, you can hang, and
Yeah.
you can win this race, right? So
Yeah.
the race profile, I think, also is part of the character and personality of how exciting it is.
Yeah. I mean, the race is technically not terribly challenging. It's relatively flat except for the wall. The speeds can be very, very high, as I recall back when I did it in '94. So it's the speed, I think, that is the challenge. And back then, the distance was 156 miles. We pared that down because now you can't run according to the rules. Races can uh, um, back to back. I'm sorry, at the same time. So the women will be racing first, starting at 8:30. They'll be doing just over 60 miles. The men will be racing second. They'll be doing just over 120 miles. And so this race is rated at 1.1. So we are allowed to invite World Tour teams, Pro Series teams, and Continental teams. All teams need to be UCI registered. And we have 20 women's teams and 15 men's teams. And, for me, it wasn't a matter of necessarily who was coming. I know there'll be some diehards out there that are Jumbo fans or UAE fans and want, Pogacar to come here, Van Aert, or, you know, uh, any other top rider. For me, it was just getting the bikes here on the streets, whoever shows up. And I know that if we
Right.
can do a great job, that we'll continue to get an even, higher level of teams down the road. And, to that point, this was not my goal to resurrect um, American professional bike racing. My goal was to resurrect the Philadelphia Cycling Classic because it's such a race that is so valued here. But if that helps to persuade other people like me or other people who have previous promotion and event ownership experience to go back to the well and start their own race, then that's great. And we have go back to the riders and the teams that were here. One thing that is kind of awkward for me now that I'm on the other side with those old riders that I used to watch. Now I'm kind of dealing with them. Hincapie and Modern Adventure Cycling, they'll be here. Jonathan Vaughters, riders that I used to watch are now directing teams, and those teams are coming here. And I'm this I don't want to put
You're
myself
the
down, but
guy.
a bit of a
You're the
nobody.
guy
Yeah,
now.
I'm
Yep.
just some guy that brought this race back, and like, who's that guy? And here we are. And so there's a uniqueness to that being on the other side. But it would be great if there's some more leverage here in the U.S. And I know that Roy Nickman just got an investor for a developmental team in this country, who's an ex, OG rider, and
Yeah.
so there's some development there.
And Zwift and Pedal Mafia and Canyon just got together and put together a Devo team.
Yeah, so that's a little bit under the radar. Hopefully that starts to develop, and they develop a
Right.
team at the professional level that can compete here and overseas. So it's another little step in the right direction. But we'll have to see what direction the race goes in and how it affects the rest of the country. But I can tell you right now that back to the OGs and the people in the community and everybody that I touch, I mean, they're just, they can't wait. I mean, the excitement is real.
So, Carlos, you shared so much insight with us about what it takes to jumpstart the classic American single day race. Thank you for that. I always end my interviews with the question of how do you consider bike racing in the context of business? I mean, what are some of the parallels that you draw, that you see? And yeah, again, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you for spending time with us.
A business like my own salon, brick and mortar, you can have all the business outline on paper, but every day brings something new. The washing machine may break. You might have a client not show up. You may have someone be sick and call out and have to reschedule your clients. You have to be able to, jump from one stone to another, maybe balance on one foot and dip your foot in the water, but you got to have a way to get to that next step without falling in. So, the goal is to be, quick on your feet, be able to, make good decisions, being able to understand the ebb and flow, right? Sometimes the pack's going to slow up and not much is going to happen. And you're sitting back there. And why isn't anybody else going fast? And you don't want to be up there because you want to take the free ride. Sometimes you have to go to the front and pull it along. And then sometimes you have to let other people drive the breakaway, so to speak. And you have to have a good team, right? You have to be communicating in that radio to your teammates to know what everybody's doing, whether or not it's a team director in the car, someone getting bottles. It takes a team. It can't be, there's no I in team, right? It's not about me. At my salon, it's about my coworkers and all their support. I'm an employee with them. Yes, I am the boss, but I'm working together toward the common goal to do great hair, to make people happy, and to provide a great service. And when you're putting on a bicycle race at this level, it's to understand all the layers that go into it, keep everybody happy, realize that there's going to be bumps in the road, but you're all in to get to the finish line. And, you may not finish first, and you may not finish, but there's always another day where you get back on the bike, or you get back with your scissors, or you get back on your podcast, and today's another day. And so, it's a long road, and you've got to be passionate, you have to be persistent, and you have to persevere.
Right.
And that's what I'd have
All
to
right.
say. Thanks so much for your time, Sam. And it's great to share this with you and your community. And I hope everybody, clicks on Philadelphia Cycling to find out, PhiladelphiaCyclingClassic.com, or social media on Instagram to find out more. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure is all ours, and I'm so excited for you with race day coming up, and we just wish it's a smashing success, and wish you guys many more years of bike racing.
It's been an honor to collaborate, and thank you so much for the opportunity. You're doing a great job. Keep it up.
Thanks, Carlos. Cheers.
Sure.